Welcome to the Simple Minds podcast, where six mates unpack three topics over a new drink each week. Fuck it, just go with that. We'll fix it if it's... Okay, guys, welcome. Episode 10. There are four of us in the room today. We have myself, Marco, and then...
Oh, me, Matt Hannum. Welcome, everyone. Sorry, Michael. I'm not jumping. I'm not talking over you even in the intro.
And Michael Duncan as well, to Matt's left. And to my left is...
Justin Bourne. What's up?
Classic Justin Bourne intro. Welcome, everybody. Double digits for Simple Minds podcast. It's quite cool little milestone.
Double digits, nice.
Double digits.
Unfortunately, with the absence of Conrad and Travis, but we'll toast to them as well.
Conrad is here in spirit.
He's here in spirit.
The psychic vibes coming through.
I just had a conversation with him, and I've got some. He couldn't. He had to make sure he got something into the podcast. So I had a quick word about my topic, and I'll deliver some. Yeah, really. I'll deliver some of his thoughts around my question.
Excellent.
Amazing.
I can't believe that.
It was pure coincidence, but anyway, it sounds good in theory.
All right, so I'm on booze this week, and for you guys, I've brought a whiskey, Scotch whiskey. It's called Highland Park. It's the 12-year-old, and Highland Park. This is a beautiful little drop. Really, really good value for money, and interesting little point about it. The distillery is the most northern distillery that there is in Scotland on a little island called Orkney.
Oh, it's on Orkney. Wow.
Yeah, it's on Orkney.
Wow,
yeah.
That's cool.
I'd love to get there one day. But really, really cool. The logo is pretty badass as well. It's got this kind of shield with a big H on it, and you can see it's quite Nordic.
It's nice.
So yeah.
And when you say good value?
Like $55-$60 for the bottle.
Yeah,
and it every year gets consistently rated up there as one of the best.
Nice.
It's beautiful. It's got a bit of smoke, a little bit of sweetness, real nice introductory whiskey. I'll be keen to hear what you guys think about it. But there you go. Does anyone want any ice?
I'll have my 2 cubes, please.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll run a similar path today.
No worries.
It is summery.
It is. It's bloody hot outside, eh?
It is.
It is. It's horrible.
Weird.
Muggy, isn't it? It's like...
All right, there you go. Everyone's going nice. I'm going to join you guys in.
Fantastic.
Let's do it.
Oh, smells good.
Cheers, gents.
Cheers, guys.
Happy 10th.
Yes. Happy 10.
Birthday.
Double digits.
X marks the spot.
All right.
Nice. Very warming.
We've done this as the third whiskey we've done.
Yeah, we've had a few whiskies.
Yeah, we had. So what do we had? We had Talisker. We had.
Oh, that one, Ben Loach or whatever it was.
I lost one.
Oh, it's down there, yeah.
Oh, Ben Rock. Okay, cool.
Right.
And I think we've had another one.
This is another one here.
No,
we did pineapple rum.
Pineapple
gin,
rum.
Actually, we've done
VB,
2
champagne.
Champagne was it.
And I missed the last one, but what we had, cold brew or...
Yeah, cold brew.
Cold brew, yeah.
Cold brew in the morning.
Yeah, fair enough. You know, we get
impromptu morning session.
Good, so we're
I was pinging the rest of the day last
cold brew.
Thursday.
Maybe you needed the whiskey.
Yeah.
Lovely.
All right, so first on content is Mr. Matt Hannum to my left, and I'm keen to hear what you've brought for us today, mate.
It's good. Yeah, I feel like it's actually been a little while since I've had content, and that's probably not true, but it just feels that way.
I can't remember your last one.
Well, I missed the last one, and yeah, I think the time before that, I didn't have something prepared, and Conrad jumped in for me. So anyway, I've decided to lighten the atmosphere a little bit today.
Okay.
Maybe. We'll see where the conversation goes.
I'm sure it will disappear down somewhere at some stage.
That's it. So, for you guys obviously know, I love my podcasting, and we're obviously podcasting once a week. But I also have my other show, shameless plug then, Amplify Your Business podcast with me. But look, that show's a bit different. I interview a guest. I have had some of you as guests and some not. But one thing I've been doing recently is asking the question towards the end of the podcast, typically on what is your favourite Disney movie? Usually likes to throw them off a little bit, but I quite like the question because, ironically, you typically will identify with a character or a storyline, and obviously the hero's journey flows through most Disney movies. I know I thought it's been quite interesting. I've had some really interesting responses from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang to to The Lion King to I don't like Disney, and I've never watched Disney my whole life, which was the strangest one.
Who is that? Come on, surely.
That was Paul Raimondo.
He's lying. He's lying.
Probably.
I challenge you, Paul Raimondo, that you've never watched a Disney movie.
Well, Paul Raimondo went to what did he say? Dragon Ball Z and all this sort of stuff is what he watched a lot as a kid. So he just never really watched any Disney.
Wow.
Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. I'll throw out a plug for Dave Clare, who likes that movie. I said we should. It'd be nice to probably watch a movie like that.
One of the scariest characters in Disney movies as well, the child catcher.
Yeah, well, I mean, in a lot of movies,
there's always
the child catcher.
Yeah.
So mine is, I have obviously a few others, but really my favourite Disney movie at this point is Moana, and that sort of stems off the back of Tash being, or my wife being, obviously part Polynesian and born out that way. When I sort of see that little girl, I see a lot of my daughter who just turned 6, and just generally it reminds me of the island and the Pacific. Wow. and Niue in particular is just a magical place, and I get there as often as possible. Just the energy, the vibe, the people, and that movie. Like I myself even felt quite emotional watching that, and I was sitting there, watching it with a lot of people, from the island and thereabouts, and it's really cool. So that's my favourite Disney movie.
I've never seen that one.
We'll definitely check it out. So I've got The Rock in it too, which is nice.
And Conrad, he makes an appearance.
Yeah, Conrad, so he makes an appearance as well as The Rock. We'd like to think so anyway. So look, that's my favourite Disney movie. So not quite from the hero's journey alignment, but I find it really interesting to ask the question, and I think it's an interesting topic. I will throw Conrad in there. So I just had a conversation with him, and
can we try and guess what his favourite Disney movie is?
Yes, you can. Definitely go for it. Have a think about it.
That because I have no idea.
Yeah, that was a. I don't know what it's gonna be.
Pinocchio. Close.
No. Well, actually, I'll give you that for close, because the first thing he said to me was Bugs Bunny, and I said, "Hang on, that's Warner Brothers." What are you talking about, Bugs Bunny? So anyway, that was the first thing. But the second thing he said was, "Well, actually, everyone thinks I'm a demigod, The Rock from Moana. So we'll call me Maui, and we can be from Moana." So Conrad likes to identify himself as a demigod
which surprises no one by now.
Which surprises no one. Built as the caricature of The Rock.
Yeah.
So for those that haven't seen it, I mean, you can imagine the probably biggest looking Pacific Islander you can get, absolutely ripped, covered in tattoos, and the voice of The Rock. So if you can imagine that, probably tone that down. Think of that being a grape, and just shrivel that down into a sultana, and that's probably Conrad.
Yeah.
No, that's probably a bit rough, Conrad. I think you probably look like The Rock. But, look, point being, I think Disney movies are really cool. They've got amazing stories. They've got amazing characters. I'd like to just lighten the load on some of the deep conversation we've had. And I'd be just really curious to see. I've tried to talk a little bit to give you guys plenty of time.
Yeah, I know. You should be thinking a bit harder than that.
Well, I've got one just to give you guys a bit more time if you need. Not in terms of which movie, but you keep mentioning the hero's journey. And you've mentioned that to me before when you were giving me ideas for structuring a pitch, actually. Mm-hmm. So do you want to talk a little bit about the hero's journey, how you might use it day to day or in your business? Because I remember I was trying to put together a sponsorship pitch, and you're like, well, a hero's journey could be quite a cool twist on how to present that. So
awesome. Yeah, look, so hero's journey is something. I mean, certainly, I'm in digital marketing, and some of us are involved in the space, creating video, creating video, audio, or even blog writing, the written word. We humans love stories, right? From way back in the day when we were
from biblical
to painting on the wall of caves, which I think in some weird way is going to come back in another 1,000 years, where emojis will be painted on the side of caves. But anyway, the hero's journey is really just many stories, like when you watch a TV show, it's an archetype. And if you watch any Disney movie or so many stories, you'll see them just go through this natural progression where I should pull it up in front of me, but really the hero's journey starts with someone who's just happy and things are moving along, and then typically something will go wrong, and they'll have to challenge their mindset. It's basically the progression where you go through certain challenges. I mean, all right, I'll just pull it up. So that's probably a far better way to talk about it. Let's have a little look-see. So let's go with an actual flow chart. So to start off the hero's journey, there's always a call to adventure. So that basically something happens in their life, some sort of situation arises, and there's an opportunity to go on a trip or to go out and call it an adventure. You then basically go through a series of different approaches where you find a mentor or a helper. You go through different levels of challenges until you move into a really, really tough situation. Which in this particular flowchart, this is a random one that we pulled up, and you go into this abyss, and in that abyss there's some form of a death or a rebirth, and you'll find that in a story where people have sort of got nothing to lose, and they get into that frame of mind where there's nothing to lose. I mean, think Rocky Balboa. Think
Indiana Jones.
Think Indiana Jones. Think any of these kind of movies. Like they've gone on this journey and they get to a point where they can't turn back. They sort of transform into someone different, and then there's generally some form of atonement. So just think about this effective journey, and you'll see it in movies. You'll see it in ads that are a minute long, where someone starts off as a normal person and then they move through these series of challenges and to the point that they overcome it and are a new person out the other side, and everything's happy and rosy, and the guy got the girl or the girl got the guy, and happily ever after.
So in the Disney movie that what's it called? Moana. I have actually seen it. I have it once, I think.
Okay.
I was trying to there's a famous song in that as well. I can't remember what it is. But
You're welcome.
the hero in that is the girl, obviously. Yeah.
The hero is the girl. So
Yeah.
Moana is she's the female lead, and so basically the short story is she's the chief's daughter, and the land is drying up because of something that the demigod has done to one of the other gods, or however they put it, and she has to basically. The land is basically losing all its nutrients, so she's in charge and supposed to take over the village, but she's and she can see that there's problems and they're not going to necessarily survive the long term on their island. Her dad is the chief, and he used to be the guy who was really challenged the norm, etc. And he did some crazy stuff in the past and tried to sail away from the island to help find new resource and other things. And basically, I think his friend drowned and ended up back on the island. He became very conservative. So she always had to fight the challenges of her father, trying to tell her not to take risks, but she knew she had to take risks to go and help her people. So she eventually grabs effectively a canoe, a kayak, and shoots out into the middle of the ocean in search to basically solve this mystery. There's different levels of mentors and other characters, including Maui, who's in there along the storylines, but eventually she helps solve the riddle, and she comes back to her people as the hero, and she solves the day, but she's effectively a 13 or 14-year-old girl. I think she's quite young.
I mean, Disney movies really are built on that same.
Oh, I mean,
really like
they
Beauty
really
and the
are.
Beast. I mean, all of them. Lion King, everything.
But if you look at almost any movie, very rarely do they actually falter from that sort of structure. They might try and do things a little different, but they stay on that line.
A sidestep into the more serious stuff that we talk about, which I've touched on, is Dalio. Dalio actually references the hero journey in his kind of book and his kind of experience, and referencing it to other people too, kind of going through their own hero's journey as well, which is also very interesting.
Everyone does, right? And that's, I guess, what I wanted to bring that back to, like with entrepreneurship. Like any non-fiction book, we typically relate to the stories of the people as well, and the first half of the book is us reading their hero's journey. And without a couple of interesting chapters and a few big bumps on along the process and along their journey and ride, there is no journey. I mean, The Alchemist is a hero's journey.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
like effectively, it's just that. There's the different mentors along the way.
I had to Google all the Disney movies. Marvel's now Disney. Does that count?
Yeah.
So
Star Wars.
Star Wars.
Lucasfilms is
Tron, I think Tron.
I mean, they're buying up the
Pirates of
world.
the Caribbean.
Yeah,
Disney.
that's true.
Um,
So who do you identify with, Justin?
Me? Oh, it's a super tricky one. I am just an outright. I love all animated movies, no matter what.
Yeah.
There's something about them. I've always just had a real soft spot. Like even now for Moana, like I'll watch Moana, The Good Dinosaur, Nemo's, all of this stuff. I don't have children or anything, and I really love all those type of movies. And obviously also, I guess I run a 3D company, so I appreciate the. Yeah, anything kind of Pixar. Toy Story is a big influence into actually why I run my business and helped me towards kind of my passion. So there's Pixar. But if I go back younger, it was kind of like Lion King, a little bit of, those cartoon ones. I think Bambi when I was real young.
That's also Bambi's from 19...
When I look, because I've got the list here, and like I associate with a lot of them, it's super hard for me to pick one. If you put my favorite, Big Hero 6, which is an animated one, which doesn't get a lot of ground time, and Inside Out is actually super deep. Inside Out is super deep, and I really enjoy that. But I'm a big fan of Marvel, so like I don't know, can I say all of them?
Every single
one of them I love.
Like
Guardians of the Galaxy, which is now Disney, is one of my all-time love faves.
Number one, hey. Number two was a little bit.
Number one.
Take me back to Toy Story then. So love Disney. I'm the same. Like I get to watch them a lot now. You find that the kids. Hang on, the kids have left the room and I'm still watching it.
101
that's pretty much
101 Dalmatians.
See, okay, so take me to Toy Story then. How did Toy Story influence you starting your business?
I can't really recall what would be the single moment or what it was. I think it just would have been, I guess, at the time. And this is a common theme of like a couple of the people who, a couple of my team members and other people are typically been inspired by Toy Story because at the time
it was the first
kind of the first
3D.
major 3. It was, I believe, the first feature full 3D film.
Yeah. You look back in it now though, and you sort of go, it does look dodgy.
It does look dodgy now,
compared to what we.
But back then, and I think as a kid, you were associated so much because it was about toys, and back then, not that old, we didn't. I mean, we never. When I was 10, the best thing going was a Super Nintendo, and we weren't that kind of well off, so we didn't have really a gaming console for a while because it was so expensive. Yeah. So you still played with lots of toys. I don't know what they do these days, but
iPads from about 2.
And
from about 2 months.
These toys come into life, and I guess it was that whole thing of a computer created this, and I think I was always fascinated with computers growing up. And the fact that you can create this stuff from nothing. I was always big into drawing too, so cartoons. I was massive Dragon Ball Z. Used to always draw Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah, and Pokemon.
I
used to draw.
It was Pokemon.
We're too old for that.
I just wanted to check with a bit of context for people that may not know what you actually do, though. Your business is in 3D visualization, right?
Correct.
So that's why I think.
And I'm super passionate about it. So. I don't know.
It's an amazing story, the Pixar story, and even the Steve
Pixar
Jobs
story
connection with Pixar as well.
Yeah, he has had a big influence into it. I don't know if I have an all-time favourite. I love Moana as well. Yeah. And that's one of the most recent ones. Frozen's not bad considering.
Oh, dude, I've watched Frozen that many times.
I know everyone who is children.
You get young kids,
have abused Frozen.
I've got like 7 Frozen dresses in the house. Frozen was epic. That was a big movie for them.
Our Frozen, because my kids are a bit older, was Monsters Inc.
Yeah.
And Lion King. I mean, Lion King is
Lion
King for me is the number one Disney movie. Just it's epic. Okay. It's got a connection to The Alchemist. And I've seen it live and on Broadway.
I've seen that's great.
Yeah. And just the music, Tim Rice and Andrew Lloyd Webber did the music. Yeah. Elton John sang. The whole had the ingredients in that movie just made it. It's an unforgettable movie. We'll still watch it to this day. At least once a year we'll stick it on and.
It is a great movie.
Rafiki is a boss. Asante-san, squash banana. That is my favourite.
Pumbaa.
I think just based on the fact that I know quite a few songs off by heart from that movie, that's got to be the winner. But then Big Hero 6 and Inside Out for me would have been the other ones.
Big Hero
but I
6.
watched them a lot older.
Yeah.
Big Hero 6, the scene where he comes in and he's running low on batteries, is probably one of the funniest scenes in any Disney movie, actually. It's just hilarious. So good.
A couple of those animated movies really give me goosebumps for some reason. I don't know what it is, just for whatever reason. I really connect with the animated stuff.
Yeah.
Cool.
So what have we got then? What's yours?
Well, I said Moana, and Conrad's Moana too for the.
Or Bugs Bunny.
He's probably a mixture between sort of, I guess, The Rock and Arnold Schwarzenegger. I think Conrad. If you had to just sort of put a couple of guys together, so no Moana and Bugs Bunny, I suppose. Yeah, that's absolutely true.
We'll give Bugs Bunny to Conrad, even though it's the Warner Brothers. Lion King for me, for sure.
Mine's, I don't know if I end up with one
Yeah, I
Toy
think you
Story
do.
and kind of all animated.
Toy Story is pretty relevant to you, I reckon.
That's another one.
Was it
I
the
think
Bugs?
Bugs
Was it
Life-
Bugs Life straight after Toy Story?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, okay.
I enjoyed that one
It's a
too.
good one
Being in the US and
Yeah.
watching that, going to some, like, it was a huge deal.
Yeah.
The evil critic
And then
flying in.
The
Yeah,
Lion
that's
King
cool.
as well is high.
Yeah.
Oh.
And Lion King for me. So
Too many.
That was a pretty cool topic, actually. I'm actually
Yeah, when you
impressed
first
that
heard
we
me say
put
it.
it back to actually using it in business and inspiration and stuff like that. Because I was like, well, 15 minutes just chat about movies. Here we go.
No, not movies at all. And that's the thing, yeah. I think you identify with characters, but then there's so much of life in these things. They're so good at that. Like, they are an incredible media company, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And,
yeah.
you know,
The
everything-
Walt Disney story himself is amazing.
Yeah, it's insane. But no, thanks. That was awesome. I wanted to sort of change the pace a little
That was
bit.
good.
Nice one, man. And Michael, what do you got for us
Well,
today?
this links in fairly well. I can connect it.
We always say that,
We
hey?
always say that. I can. Jordan Peterson, my man just now, who I'm listening to a lot of, which was on the last episode about the evil in all of us.
Oh, yeah?
I'm not going down as deep as that, but he talks a lot about the hero journey, and he uses Pinocchio and Sleeping Beauty a lot in his lectures.
Yeah, okay.
And he's done a whole series, biblical series and stuff. He uses that archetypal stuff really well.
Yeah.
His Pinocchio stuff is killer, by the way. You must.
Check it out, yeah.
Jordan
100%.
Peterson, Pinocchio story. Look on YouTube, amazing stuff. But
Uh-oh.
I was listening to a Jordan Peterson podcast the other day with Joe Rogan, my other main man, who does an amazing podcast, and hopefully he's up to like 1,000 and friggin' whatever podcast.
It's insane.
He
I
does
think
like-
you just permanently podcast and they just like start and stop it whenever they feel like.
Yeah. That's recording, I think.
Yeah, it's going.
So he was on the Jordan Peterson podcast. It was only, I think, filmed and recorded last week or even at the beginning of this week. And there was just a really amazing sentence that stood out for me that he said during it. And it was this. He said, "I believe that people's decisions tilt the world towards heaven or hell. So every decision you face a potential, yeah? So every single decision, there's a potential to go either up or down. So every decision you make, you're deciding to make the world a better place or a worse place. I'm talking like micro, macro, all decisions in life when you walk out the door. Every little thing you do has an effect on the world either positively or negatively. And he said heaven and hell. He's big into his religious connections. So my question today for you guys is, can you give us an example of something you did right today and something you did wrong in decision making? Be it a little thing saying, I didn't pick up that thing by the sink that I should have done, or just something small, something big. Hopefully there's no murder here. I think we'll be okay.
Not yet.
And I'll go to Justin for this one.
Oh.
Me again.
So just one or two things that you did right, or one or two things that you did wrong. That you know, that you were conscious of kind of knowing that you didn't quite pull that one off.
Plenty in both directions.
As I said, it can be little, it can be big.
Today and this week's been huge, so my brain's a little fuzzy. I'm just trying to think in the.
Okay, why
in the
not just
micro.
today then, sort of in the last few days?
Well, I made a decision last week. It was probably not in the micro, it was more a macro, and it was kind of in the moment, and my intuition, my gut told me not to do that. And I still went the other direction, and I guess the consequence of that, I'm not really willing to share the detail of it exactly, but the consequence of that one decision was definitely, it was the wrong decision.
Okay.
And ended up going down a path that I didn't need to go down.
So you
because
kind of
that.
knew it was.
I knew.
But your gut was saying.
My gut, my
do it.
intuition was telling me, you know, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that.
Sorry, your gut was saying don't do it.
Yeah.
But you still overrode.
But I still overrode it.
Okay.
And after.
Can we have any context?
Yeah, I need something, man.
I regretted it.
Now you regret bringing this up as the example.
Yeah, but it was a business decision.
But it was heavy. No, it was a personal decision.
Okay.
I think, in short, it was going against my word.
Okay.
I had promised someone something and went against it.
Yeah.
And so that's the context.
Yep.
And I instantly, I actually didn't instantly regret it. It was later on. But I think as well, that's something kind of, journaling on that, and it is decisions at the end of the day, right? It's that momental decision.
Yeah, so
and then it goes left or right. And sometimes at the moment, you don't know whether it's a good or a bad, which is the challenging part. I guess in terms of on the on today, I mean on the positive side, what would have been something that I did that was positive, good?
Must be heaps of things you did today.
It's interesting
Don't
that you
know.
struggle, huh? Just to pick either, right?
Well, I guess the challenge for me is there's 100 decisions on the micro every day.
That's how powerful it is, though, making that decision right or wrong. Like, I mean, imagine if everybody in the world made the right decision all the time. Just these little things. That's how you change the world.
And I think I remember more, and I think this comes back to more of once we had talked about, I think it was the love languages around some of the affirmation stuff, is that I probably remember more the negatives than I do the positives.
Yeah.
I rarely
You probably hit home a little bit more.
I mean, to me is, I don't know. And I think this comes back to I sometimes fail, it's just a little bit of a sidestep. Personally, I fail to acknowledge a lot of positive stuff.
Yeah.
And so I quickly skim past. It's like, oh, there was a win there. Yeah, great, move on. Whereas the challenges or the negatives, which comes back to the suffering thing, I probably remember more than I do and I don't know whether, some people say you should smell the roses more or you should celebrate that more. I'm like, whatever. And so maybe I think I struggle with the good side.
You're too much pain plus reflection equals growth.
Probably. I mean, it's interesting. I don't know about you guys, but I really struggle to remember the positive decisions.
I'm the same, dude. Like something good happens and I'm like tick, and then I'm like already focused on the next challenge, looking for one if there is one.
What I'm asking though is if you can think of something that you did.
Oh, no,
just
no.
as a nice thing to do, or the right thing to do.
Yeah,
As an example, not sort of thinking about.
Yeah, no, I'm just following sort of where Justin when he digressed. So you've answered both, kind of.
I didn't really answer a positive
You didn't really answer either, but
no,
you
you
did. No, you did. I probably did. All right. Well, if it goes to me, unless you've got,
No, you go.
you ready? I mean, a couple of little things. I'm really looking micro, but for example, a couple of you guys were here this afternoon, and I knew I had a bit more that I needed to get done. Or Justin had light bulb, go.
I bought Marco a coffee today.
Oh,
there you go, you did.
That
Thank
made the
you.
world a better place.
Yeah, I put a smile on his face.
Yeah.
That's right.
I'm
I
really
just remembered.
interested about and I really appreciate it. It was very nice.
I'm going to buy Marco a coffee today. That was very nice.
yeah, it's really good. Because it really leads into the first thing I was going to say is that you two are walking out the door, and you said, "You coming?" And I said, "No." I said to myself, "I really need to get these one or two things done." And I said, "You know what? No." I'm just going to push past that and get on with what my list says I need to get done. So literally from that event, I could have gone out and had that quick coffee. It wasn't going to be long, but I just knew that I needed to push on. I had a lot going on today, and that's just what happened. So there's my positive.
I like it.
It's actually a personal positive, which is odd, me giving a semi-pat on the back, but thank you for raising that.
Good job,
I'll call it a semi-pat on the back because it was a very minor event. But it's just about focus, and I've actually had a killer week in terms of just really good discipline against what I wanted to do, and that was just, I guess, highlighting that, and to your point, a series of those little quality decisions during this week is what made this a solid week for me. So it was all about small things. It wasn't anything major I did. It was just lots of tiny little adjustments like that, whether it's dietary, whether it's a little bit more sleep, making that quick call, ticking those things off the list. So it was huge.
I think a lot of people think of it as, it's a little decision, it's not going to matter. Like, it doesn't matter if I do the right thing just now, there's not going to be any consequence to it.
Yeah.
They think like that, but the potential is there for it to, you do 4 or 5 right decisions in a day, your whole day can increase productivity, increase happiness 500%. It's just, it's ridiculous. Negative.
Well, this is going to be a bit of a tough one in a way. So I raced around this morning, I was out of the gym, blah, blah, blah. I ended up having to go back and grab the kids and take them to school and daycare. And I dropped off my daughter, no problem. She was in a good state. Dropped her off at school, second day of year 1.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah, wow. So that was fine. But then I had my son and I was taking him to daycare. And it just wasn't in a great frame this morning. He was just like making a lot of noise, whinging. Nothing much wrong, but it just is what it is. On the way in, I just sort of probably pandered to him a little bit and created, I guess, a little bit of a... not a situation, but I allowed him to get away with it a little bit much. And the reason why I'll pin that as negative is that's me not wanting to be a little bit harsher on him at times. And I think as a parent, something I'm brutally aware of at this point is how amazing our kids have it and how you then instill significant discipline into them when you can just easily let them off with things. Because really, if I let him off with something or whatever's going on, I'm really letting him down. For the longer term. So it was just a little thing, and I guess I basically gave him an extra 5 minutes of just him being a bit silly and me just not like resolving it in a better way, so to speak. Not that I don't want to give my kids time, it's not about that. I'm just thinking, I just know if I allow him to do certain things and allow certain behaviours that sort of stuff will continue. So it's something.
The next time.
And as parents, I think just constantly we're lazy in that we don't want our kids to be upset, so we don't deliver.
It's easier, isn't it?
We don't deliver some of the harder medication, at times, and just like sort of, help mold them into who we want them to be. So I don't know if that's that's something I picked up after I dropped him off was that I just really should have. Adjusted to the situation a little bit better, and that's because I'm letting him down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. Marco?
So we've got a couple of minutes left for this slot, and maybe we can take my last couple of minutes to understand. It's Jordan Peterson, right?
Yep.
Does he ever reflect on, because the statement that if everyone made more correct decisions, the right decisions, then the world would be a better place. But both the term correct and better, they're just perspectives, right? So
value-driven decisions, not just, it comes down to what you think is right and what you think is wrong, I suppose.
Yeah. Because
one right decision for someone might impact other people.
Yeah, and they might, based on their perspectives and their values, they're never going to be aligned, right?
No.
So
on an individual basis, you can get up in the morning, you can, I don't know, like for example, walking down the street, the rubbish thing, like walking along, you can either pick that bit of rubbish up, put it in the bin that's right there, or not do it.
Yeah.
Like little things like that. And if you pick it up, put it in there, you made the right decision, the world is a slightly better place because of that.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a pretty open question, and it is down to, I suppose, how you view the right thing and the wrong thing.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think most of our Western society have a set of values that we kind of live by.
Sure.
I suppose.
Yeah.
So an example then, so are you struggling to find...
No, I've got a really good example.
Yeah, let's hear it.
So it's like, but for me, it's just a very like, to say if everyone made more correct decisions, the world would be a better place.
His big thing is, sort yourself out, don't try to take over the world and do this and do that and be this hero.
Yeah.
Without freaking, and he references cleaning your freaking room,
Yeah.
And he goes on, because he got hammered by the social justice warriors last year. And he just looks at them and goes, half these people have no idea what they even want. They've been told stuff by their by the guys at university, and they're just following along in a group mentality.
This will never
They haven't
happen.
even got their own life sorted out.
Every ecosystem, Mike, like every community, every ecosystem, there's always going to be that top to bottom or left to right, or that complete mix of people. Like if you're talking about making the bed, there's always going to be this proportion. This percentage does this percentage does half, this percentage doesn't do it.
He's talking on an individual basis.
Yeah, but there's no way. Like everyone makes the right decision for themselves at every time, based on the information in front of them and based on their influences.
Yeah.
Effectively.
Exactly.
No, they don't make the wrong decision. I mean, I guess on reflection, they might think maybe I should have or not, but it's really hard to say that because one right decision for one country that's dealing with another country is obviously very different to the alternative perspective.
We've gone from individuals to countries.
No, we haven't. I'm just saying, for example, I'm trying to group it to more people. I'm just saying, like, on where Marco took it, on the big scale.
No, but even
not,
on the individual scale, right?
Yeah, even on the individual scale. I mean, that's why.
You just assume
I think there's
religion.
an innate good in people.
Exactly.
And that's a shared thing.
But they'll also protect themselves largely first.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that you naturally will step away from a vehicle driving towards you, first before you realise, unless there's someone super close to you, like a family member, your child or something, that you might throw them out of the way. You'll generally step back as your first instinct, and then work out if you can help someone else or whatever. You know what I mean? We will look after ourselves instinctively.
Well, that's what he's talking about. He's talking about looking after yourself, like sorting yourself out.
Yeah,
doing the right
guess I'm
things.
talking more from a more acute level, but I think sorry.
It is a very relevant lens to put over all of your decisions, though, because say as we come into an era where we have to program things to make decisions for us in split seconds. The classic example is programming self-driving cars, right? So if a crash is imminent, what decision does it make? Save the driver, save the pedestrian,
save the passengers. These are very real things that they've been discussing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But the ethics of that, boils down to what's your view of right or wrong? What are your values? So do you prioritize youth over wisdom and age, or whatever, right? But I think it's extremely relevant to the decisions that are having to be made with the progress of technology. To round it out with my, let's say, one decision that's very easy to quantify that's probably negative for the community is that this week I made the decision to stop volunteering at Orange Sky after a year and a bit. So really sad, but also, you guys know I'm in a space about doing things first and foremost for myself at the moment, and I found that I really learnt what I went into to get from there. I could get infinite more, but it really was about perspective. Each week going in and get a dose of how good I have it going into my weekend. But the reason I was staying there was because I didn't want to tell people that I'd stopped, right? That's the wrong reason to be there. So I made the decision to stop. So that's probably something that's made the world a worse place. And then something that made the world a better place. One of our friends on shift this morning, it was my last shift this morning on Orange Sky.
So just context.
Orange Sky, thanks, is a mobile laundry service. And they've also moved into showers for people without homes. And I volunteer there every Friday morning. Today was my last day. And just picked a guy that I saw was not in his usual state, because you get to know the friends there pretty well. We call everyone that comes and uses the service a friend. And just made an effort and made time to have a conversation. And it does help.
That would have made his world a lot better today.
Yeah, exactly. So, both flip sides of a decision.
I'm sure the world's very grateful for the 18 months of time that you've put into it, dude. So,
I
know you're not down on yourself because of it. You're just looking for a negative, but things always have a time limit too, and maybe it's time to move on and something else will come.
But and it also comes down to perspective, right? So it could be a negative in the micro of the community, but what if I was going to spend my Fridays working for some massive organisation where I had much further reach and impact? Yeah. So it's just all perspective.
Yeah. Oh, it is all perspective. But I think there's definite good things and bad things you can be doing on a day-to-day basis that will help.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with that.
Help the world come together.
That was good, Mike. That was a little less deep, Mike.
A little less deep.
A little less deep.
Brought Jordan Peterson in, so
Yeah, well, at least we went to...
We're staying a little shallow today,
we
boys.
went
So
to
it's
yeah,
Justin
we
just
went
about to
somewhere
drop
live.
some.
where's the last question's coming up? So
Justin, what have you got for us?
The last question. Well, I guess just to kind of wrap, there's an interesting conversation around what's good or bad, and I think you could swing kind of both ways. But I think a simple example of smiling at someone and saying hello, that's a little decision that if 7 billion of, I know you, at the end of your sheet there, you got 7 billion of us. If 7 billion of us did that, the world would fundamentally be a better place.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and I think that's where we could all agree on some fundamental goods and some fundamental bads, and there'd be a lot of grey in between based on your ecosystem, the country you're born, perspectives, everything. It's crazy. And I don't know, with this conversation, I'm happy to maybe 2 topics because this week's been pretty hectic. So
You're talking about your question now?
for the next kind of last segment is we could either maybe debate further on good and bad, which could get deep and interesting, because we've talked about stoicism, which can kind of, you know, change your perspective on things. And or what I'd be interested, the other one we could go, and I'm willing to put this to the table, is, I mean, we're 4 weeks into the year, 1 month down, 2nd of Feb. It's pretty crazy.
8%.
Yeah, and it's been interesting.
Way of putting it.
And going off the hero's journey, I thought it could be interesting to keep maybe the topic or the theme, which is connected to decisions a little bit. Of since the start of the year, if we take off the heroes, have you had to overcome any challenges or battles that you've had to, you know, have you had a mini hero's journey from the start of the year to now? Because for me, this week's been super challenging for me and has really tested myself in my mental game. And I know we talk a lot of this stuff, but it's easier said than done. And so I'm willing to put it, we can dissect good and bad for the next 15, 20 minutes, or we can...
Should we go to Instapoll for this?
Instapoll, alive. Or we can... I can share more around that and, you know, go off a little bit of what we've been thinking about of these decisions and share...
Well, you can choose.
Me?
You choose.
Or we can put a vote. I mean, there's 4 of us. If the vote splits, then Justin can pick.
All right.
All right. I'm going to go with next topic, which would be
Hero's Journey.
Hero's Journey, or for the year.
I'm gonna
That's where I'm
second.
at.
I'll second that.
Michael, where you at?
I'll go with the hero's journey. I'm good with that.
All right, we're going in. Let's
Going
go.
in.
But I mean, as you said, there'll be elements of that in it anyways.
Yeah. So, because we're 4 weeks into the year, right? And each of us have had conversations, and so I run my own business, and I committed to a couple things at the beginning, and I've been super challenged. And I know individually for a couple of you, the last couple of weeks, you've had a couple, valleys per se, and I don't actually think we've talked peaks and valleys either.
No, not in depth.
And that's kind of potentially part of the hero's journey. So there's a great book called Peaks and Valleys by someone
I'll look up the
Spencer.
author while you're chatting.
Yeah.
Someone Spencer, a great book, short read, similar to The Alchemist.
Really
it's kind
good.
of
Isn't
a
it
fate.
the same guy that Who
Moved My Cheese? Yeah, I haven't read that one.
Crazy.
It's a kind of a fable again, like The Alchemist. It's got
Spencer Johnson.
I
Spencer
didn't realise it
Johnson.
was a fable.
Yeah.
I thought it was one
Have you not read it?
Businessy self-help one. No.
Okay, it's a great book.
It's a great
You
book.
can read it.
Oh, you'll love this book.
Yeah.
I can't believe you haven't read
I've
it.
done
Yeah.
the cheese one.
Wow.
You can read it in
If I had it
about.
here, I'd give it to you right now, but it's not here. Sorry.
Who haven't? I think it's a staple that everyone
Yeah.
should
Okay.
read. And in short, we'll go through peaks and valleys.
Yeah.
And other words, ups and downs, positives, negatives, yin yang.
Half full, half empty.
Yeah, all of that stuff. And, you know, we kind of can have deeper valleys, deeper peaks. And this kind of week, I experienced, I guess, a valley. And
Deep valley?
It could have been deep, depending on how I handled it. And it's just interesting for me that, you know, with all the tools and everything we may talk about, how you can still go there. And I don't know if there's really a question around this or more of just sharing experience and just being kind of vulnerable. But, you know, we may talk, like I said, talk this stuff. And I was super challenged earlier this week, and it really took me down. And but the interesting thing was I managed to rebound out of it fairly quickly. And then it was kind of like, I've got these problems, I've got these things that I've been putting off, and I kind of had to, I wouldn't say mope, but I had to experience them, felt a bit down, and I was like, nah, fuck it. And then the next day, I was like, gonna tackle them. And I did one thing, then the momentum was like, okay, tick. Then did the next thing. Because the day prior, so this was like on a Tuesday this week, and legit, it felt like everything was hitting. So, and I think we all feel like that as well. Sometimes what can happen is one bad thing happens, and then all these other things seem to happen, right? I don't know if anyone's had, it seems to all happen at the same time.
That's what you sort of focus on.
Well, it's perspective. It's what you're looking at. Right?
Yes.
It's a lens.
Yeah. So I had all these things coming, and it's just like, really today, like, and then something else happened later that day, and I'm like, serious, really, and it really beats you up, and but then the next day I managed to flip it and tackle one thing, then the next thing.
Do you remember how you flipped it? Did you meditate on it? Did you go away? Did you go for a walk? Did you try or did you just realize what was going on and sort of?
I think I just realized what was going on, and I'm grateful for, which we've talked about, my wife, who kind of was just the ear to kind of listen, and all I really needed to do was just kind of allow it to be, which I think helped me. So I guess in my instance, what I did was allow it to be, acknowledge what was happening, going, this is a valley, this is temporary, I'll be able to get through it, but just live with the kind of, you could almost say the suffering state for like a few hours.
Yeah.
Temporary. And that was it. And then just I journaled on that evening going, this is temporary, you'll get through it, it all works out in the end. And went to bed on that thought, woke up, new day, and just went on with it. And so, I don't know, Marco, you shared on the last podcast something big with you. I don't know if you want to go there. Matt, I know you shared a small thing, whether you want to share that or not, with me the other day. But have you already in this year experienced a valley, and was it deep? And again, did you overcome it quickly, or did you allow it to go? I don't know if you guys want to share, because those valleys are those hero moments, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
They're
part of the abyss. There's certain areas where you have to experience both.
It's where the growth comes from.
Yeah, it's where growth comes from. But do you want to
well.
jump into that, or do you want me to go? Or?
Let's go with you, just because I'll just rehash on that, and I can go a little bit further into it and an update on it. But let's go with something fresh first.
Yeah, so I did. I mean, I don't know how to quite describe it, but I guess it was probably a week or 10 days ago, and I just hit a point. I mean, I think when you're running your own business like I do, there's always constant activity. There's always good things, bad things, different levels. And one of the biggest problem's the wrong word, but one of the key things to running a business is, where are you focused? The second, if you're not focused forward and saying, rah, let's go, it's 18, we're doing this, we're focused forward. The second you start to sort of focus backwards, that's when you can start to look at things, I think, in a negative perspective as well. And then you start to bring potentially some of that horror forward, because you're like, what if more of those, you look back with the wrong lens, and there's good things and bad things happened in the past, but you might grab the bad things because you're in that lens. You face forward, you add more of those bad things into the potential future, and you're like, whoa, shit, you can move into
What's the point?
What's the point? You can move into a bit of a doom and gloom space. Like, as business owners, there's been times when you're all of a sudden you don't get paid that month, or whatever happens. You know, things just happen. And I think so. I experienced the point, like I've had a phenomenal month, great month. So much is going on. Yet despite that, I've still had a couple of these sort of moments. And one night, it was about 10 days ago or so, it just went a bit deeper. And I was like, oh, hang on. I changed perspective quickly. I realised I'd focused on something heavy and hard, and to the point that I felt a physical response from it. I think what, you know, in sharing that story, and certainly in my last at least 10, 12 years of my life, the biggest thing for me is to accept those. Like, they're going to happen wherever you're at. Like, if you're a billionaire, if you're a gold medalist, if you're whatever you are, you're going to have those moments. For me, it's been like, we talk about tools and tips and tricks, and for me, it's those tools and tips and tricks that move you past that as quickly as possible without, you know, holding it and detaching it. And I'll even then lock that into 10 to 12 years ago when I started suffering, you know, some pretty extreme anxiety and even into depression, which is something that I've never experienced in my life before. What got me out of that was those little habits and learning to turn perspective quickly. And that's what I've spent over a decade getting better and better at, is, you know, and even take it to meditation and mindfulness. Crazy cloud comes over, dropping rain on you. Okay, just let that pass through. Yeah. I think it becomes that element of being almost third person, observing some of that. And that's what I did, you know, this other night, like you talked about, Justin. I think we had very much a similar sort of experience, like almost what is the point of all this like pressure and everything that we take on at times.
It was business.
It was business, yeah, it was business. It was just sort of looking, like I've had a great month, like I've had a really good month, really solid business month, but sometimes you just, depending on what lens like you sometimes put in front of you, it's like, what's the point of all of this? Like, and sometimes that might be triggered by a loss of a client or this or that, or like I've got staff members turning over, lots of good clients coming in, but I think it probably was triggered by like a really good client that I really enjoy working with, leaving this month, not purely because the business model, they can't afford to keep paying us at this point. Yeah. We've done a great job, they love it, they're super happy, and I guess part of my sentiment around that was like, you know, damn, like we're doing an amazing job, they're such a great client, great people to work with, and yet like that can't even continue right now just because of the rest of the circumstances along that way. That kind of frustrated me, because I knew that we were like delivering good stuff, like there was a lot of good things going on. And I feel like
as soon as that perspective goes there, that's when you keep going down that.
Because I sort of know that out of all these clients, you know, I try and get as many of them into this, like, you know, good frame. So I've probably rambled a bit, but I guess the point was a couple of things triggered it, and I think that was one of the key ones, and it was just something that sort of fell outside of my control, and then you know, very quickly dipped into a valley in mindset space, and I actually couldn't, with all my tips and tricks and things, couldn't turn it before I went to sleep that night. I had a really rough sleep. And I woke up the next day and then started to sort of plough through it and move into a better space. But I guess the point is, like, for a long time I thought, oh, I can stop this from happening. And the truth is, that's utter fucking bullshit. And it's just like accepting that it happens, taking it on as little as possible physiologically, in my view. Like, you know, because you can do stuff with your mind to your body, right? And so taking as little toll as possible on the body and then just moving forward. And the truth is, that's not how I felt in the macro. But at that, you know, in that micro moment, which lasted for me, I guess, a few hours, and who knows what happened whilst I was in my subconscious mind when I was 7. Yeah, I got pretty down quickly. Not down. There was a bit more stress than down, but yeah, got down very quickly, but pinged out of it hard, and the next day. And I think that's due to all the work that I've put into strategies and things and other. You know.
These things do help. I mean, for me, this year has been, I've kept on plan pretty well, and I haven't had any valleys. Or if I have, I've dealt with them without dwelling on them at all, like moving straight on. It has been through meditation, through diet, through exercise, through just making the cold showers, whatever it is working. Because I mean, all this stuff about learning this and learning that, trying to have a good life and learning all the little habits, if you do all that and I mean, you're always still going to suffer, you're still going to go down, but if you can't try and control it and actually change your life in a good way, I think, I don't know, that for me this year anyway has been good. Today I did falter a little bit. I had a very just today.
Here we go.
Just today going great.
So we're now in February. So last month was great.
Oh, January was
but now we hit February. There was a falter.
No, I did procrastinate a little bit this afternoon. I've been.
All right, but do you think that's a valley, or you just had it
Well,
on
it's a little valley for me just now because I'm in a pretty good place.
Yeah.
So procrastinating, and I was a bit down on myself. I mean, I've had massive valleys over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
With my son getting diabetes and lots of things happening. I mean, it's not all. I'm not wearing rose-colored glasses. Don't you worry.
So your next valley will be around the corner at some point.
Of course it will. I mean, we talked about suffering before, and we all suffer. I'm going to suffer micro on a daily basis. I'll suffer weekly on certain things. But dealing with it and getting over it and moving forward has been a really powerful thing for me. Using all the little bits and pieces that we talk about all the time,
Mm-hmm.
So it's been good.
So here's one of the first quote that I've got journaled down from Peaks and Valleys, which you just kind of touched on.
Unfortunately, I don't have. Yeah, I journaled on Peaks and Valleys too, which is one of the only books I have.
We shared
Unfortunately,
this.
I don't have it with me.
When I go into a valley, so to cut you off quickly, and in the past, I've gone and pulled that book out.
Yeah.
And read that
wow.
at that point and gone, okay. So I've literally done that 2 or 3 times and just said, look, right now that's the book I want to read. But jump into it.
But then too many people fail to manage their good times and do not notice that they are creating their own future bad times. They waste too many resources, get away from the basics, and ignore what matters most.
And can I just on that?
Yeah.
That was, I think, is what led to this valley this week.
Yeah.
Because we didn't treat some good times and some other situations that we took them for granted.
Yeah.
And now we're paying dividends, and then the weight and the overload of all of those things builds up.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what then pushed me into the valley, I guess, with a couple of things doing. But it was because, you didn't manage the good times. So I guess, Mike, if you're going through good times,
Be grateful.
Be grateful and manage them, because your next valley is around the corner, and that will influence, which I think where you're going, Marco, influence how deep that next valley will
Absolutely.
be.
And I'm not blinkered to valleys at all.
Yeah.
I know they happen, and they happen all the time.
So in like sales terminology, for example, or business terminology, like sales is an example. Oh, we're making some good sales right now, so you're not hustling for the next lot. Or, you've got some great staff members, so you haven't really figured out the plan to, the succession plan, because one might be leaving around the corner. Like, these things are all super relevant. And, that valley thing, literally that quote, that's actually what made me, turn me around when I've read it, when I've been in a valley, is because, okay, so I change my action now. Doesn't matter how I'm feeling or what's going on, but if I change my action now, tomorrow or in 5 minutes or at some point, I'm going to be receiving the outcomes and benefits of the work that I'm doing and what I'm doing now. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's just flipped me and said, all right, it is where it is, and let's move forward.
Marco,
Okay,
wrap it up for us.
Sorry, I've got a little bit of
We've got time to jump into it.
So I guess
I think we could almost do a whole hour on this. I reckon Peaks and Valleys. Peaks and Valleys is something we should come back to.
Yeah, I think we should, and we should. I think we should also line up with Conrad, since he's the one that introduced it to pretty much all of us.
That's true. Conrad did introduce, to all of us.
Yeah.
And I think it's become almost a supplement.
So you missed that too.
You missed out.
I have heard of it. I have heard of it. But I thought
He kept mentioning it. You were about.
It's one of the other than the Alchemist. I don't recommend a lot of books, but
It's a short book too, by the way. It's easy read.
Yeah. It's probably the book I've recommended almost more than The Alchemist.
Yeah, I actually recommended it on flight home the other day. I saw some lady furiously journaling. I don't know if she'd just been back from some self-help kind of seminar or something, just filling out all of these value, mission, personal statements and stuff, and then was scribbling through the subtle art of not giving a fuck, and I was like, whoa, this lady is pinging. It's what I imagine you, Justin, to be on your flights home from Bali and stuff, and I was like, hey, you look like you're doing some good work there. And she was secretly just made me feel like shit because I was sat there moping because of the breakup. And that was that flight. Yeah, and I was like, hey, by the way, you're going to love Peaks and Valleys. So, for me, the last sort of 8-9 months have been this massive going up and on a peak, and even just thinking about, like, even listening back to how I was speaking in the last few podcasts, in 3 or 4 of them, just this real tone of arrogance and like getting pumped up a lot about how good I felt like I had everything. And then obviously going down this self-awareness focus that I'm taking myself on. I've realized that I really wasn't managing those good times. And even though I'm still in, objectively, I'm still in those good times, right? Emotionally, I'm not. And I didn't realize that I wasn't okay, so actually, because no one, if you're a first-time listener on this podcast, so I was dating a girl. I didn't realize how much I liked her. There wasn't much of a future anyway because she had to move overseas. But I travelled to go spend some time with her on the East Coast, and turns out that in the middle of that trip, she actually decided she wasn't that into me, and I hadn't realised how deep I'd gone. So it really affected me, and I'm, over the past couple of weeks, still pulling myself out of this lack of motivation and drive, because a lot of my motivators for what I was doing had switched to being about her, not about myself, right? And last episode I was talking about do things first and foremost for yourself, based on if that I'm someone that I need to do things for myself as well as being driven by fulfilling other people's needs. But yeah, I'm totally a victim of, or not a victim, sorry. I'm totally at fault of not managing my good times and not being asking the right questions at the good times and being like, what am I missing here? And where could I be strengthening?
I was going to say, how do you think what things could you have done in the last 3 months since you've been seeing, or since you were seeing Jess? What do you think you could have done that could have helped?
Staying true to my reasons for doing things. So I started doing stuff because I thought it'd impress her, or it'd be better, better for the two of us type thing. And I think I moved more away. I think it would be these subtle changes in my behaviour that wasn't first and foremost driven by me.
It's human too, right?
Absolutely.
Which is why I don't think there's any avoidance of the valleys ever.
Especially at your age as well. You've got 20...
I'm 30 in a couple of weeks, yeah.
Oh, shit.
Oh, really?
Well, I
think
think that's the point. And I wanted to... we had this discussion earlier today, and I wanted to raise it too, because we've been listening to a little bit of it as we're editing, etc. And not that we really edit, but at times we sort of come across as if we're we had it even remotely figured out.
Yeah, exactly. And we really don't.
And we're just
a bunch of hours.
And we just fucking talk about it.
Exactly. That's what I was saying before. I've actually implemented these things, and it does work. Things do work. Things you do implement in your life.
Things do help and get better, but it's always we're just so human. It's not funny.
That's kind of why.
Difference.
That's what kind of why I
Apart from Conrad, he's a god.
He's a demigod. But anyway,
demigod.
That was kind of part of why I thought it'd be cool to share. And I think that's part of when you're going through I think the awareness helps a lot. So reading something like Peaks and Valleys helps just the first step, because you can't fix anything you're not aware of. And I think in the past, these valleys I would have just sat with maybe for a long time.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Where now you're like, oh, this is one of those. This is it.
I'm gonna lead into something for this. So for those listening now, this is towards the end of this podcast, so would love to really hear who's getting something out of it. But if you're not somewhat related closely to the people around the podcast, so they're the exclusions. But as a group, so if you're not a dad or a mum or a partner or a friend, to those who genuinely probably don't have a copy in their book, we'll give out 5 copies of this. And we'll send out 5 copies of Peaks and Valleys.
Yeah, and let's just get one of them.
I think you're probably related quite closely to yourself. to you. So we'll probably split. What I'll do is I'll bring a copy in for you, Mike. But I think why not? Let's pump out a few versions of it, because I think it's a really good book. It's a simple book that anyone could digest pretty easily, and I just think there'd be high value in that. So I'd love to just jump in and just say, why don't we do that? Maybe we should start doing some stuff like this just to help share some of the things that we're looking at, because like we're saying, like, we don't have it figured out. We're just asking questions, and we're just like, we like to talk about it.
But that's the whole reason, I guess, why we're talking about. I mean, it's because of the group that we have this podcast. Like, the situation that I had this week, I don't think would have been able to get through it if it wasn't for the last, just hanging around with everyone, being exposed to all this stuff. And I think, like as you said, that's the first step, is the awareness of that. Even coming back to yours, Mike, I think, which is where you were going. I know we're sidestepping here, but you can't do good if you're not aware of good. Like, you can't hold anyone to you should be making your bed, that's the right thing to do, if they don't believe that's the right thing to do. And it's the same with the peaks and valleys. If you don't know what a valley is or what a peak is, you can't, you can't change that.
And look, most of the world is in survival mode, right?
That's right.
Most of the world, and I'm not even just talking about people in really difficult places looking for water. Like, even most people with a job are trying to survive each week. So what looks like a good situation, a good outcome, a good decision to them might not be that great for the guy next to them or the girl next to them. But they're trying to survive. They're trying to pay their rent. They're trying to whatever.
But at the end of the day, as well, what we forget, and I was grateful for the problems that I'm having, is that a lot of the stuff that we deal in the Western world. We still got it 100 times better than anyone else. Even though they're in survival mode, you've still got it better than anyone, the majority.
Do we? What's your better? I don't know. It's very different. That's very, very...
Well, it's coming back to...
We're living in one of the most prosperous times. Child mortality rates in Africa are down 70% than they were 20 years ago.
Yeah, we're living in the best time of the human race ever in history.
From a medical, from a...
But that's my point, is just in, we're living in survival mode in someone's perspective.
I think as humans, we're always in survival mode.
You can be grateful for what you have. And that's where, as well as I think the gratitude helps too. But again, you've got to be aware of that. A lot of people are not of those simple things. On a macro, how well... we are better off, so it's, as well, we have these problems, these situations or whatever it is. And it's as you said, in the macro, things are going great, right? And I could say the same. In a macro, I don't really have any fucking problems, but I've got it fucking great. I can control, I influence my everyday. I'm grateful to be running a business, which most people don't. And we talked about grass is greener. I was questioning about, I'd like to be just doing the 9 to 5. That'd be so nice. But then I realized, I've got it tough, but I'm grateful for that because, I can do these other things. And so I guess that's where I was more coming from, is that, you could be in survival mode, but fuck, you can walk to the shop and buy a coffee.
Yeah.
Shit. Or you can catch a train to wherever you want to go, rather than nomading across, I don't know, whatever. Or we just have it so well off,
that's where you were.
Sorry, you go.
I was going to say that's where you were questioning what is good and bad.
I wasn't questioning good and bad, but it comes back to that discussion.
Then you're saying somebody nomading across the desert to us getting a train is any different? It's the same thing.
Well, you would suffer in different ways, right?
So there's a quote from the book. There's an old man that teaches. It's a young guy? Is it? I can't remember. Yeah. So the old man's obviously the teacher in the story. Then the old man asked, how could someone win a silver medal for outstanding performance and be unhappy? The young man thought about it and he said, by comparing it to winning a gold medal. Then he realized, so if you want to have fewer valleys, avoid comparisons. If you enjoy what's good about the moment, you feel more like you are on a peak. So that's going to that perspective thing, right? And comparisons.
And so, even on that analogy, right, you could be traveling across the desert and be happy as fuck.
Yeah.
And you could be walking to the coffee shop out of your nice, warm, comfy, buddy Mercedes-Benz, get a coffee and whinge the fuck out of the whole experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Yeah. And it comes back to perspective. Yeah. But I guess at the macro, we've got it so fucking well off as humans.
I got Justin fired up. I've never heard you swear so much.
I've been swearing too, although do I always swear?
I don't know.
But I guess I'm a little bit passionate about that because I guess it does come back to Peterson. I do believe you've got to start with you as well, right? I'm big on that. You've got to start with yourself.
Yeah. Because if you can't sort that shit out, how are you going to help somebody else?
Correct. And I'm so big on that. And I think that's kind of what helped pull me through, was realize it almost comes back to everything we talk about.
Yeah.
Extreme ownership. It's a valley. Get on with it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a valley. Get on with it.
In a way,
Get on with it.
And so to some degree, you almost use that for motivation. You come out and you're like, fuck it.
You come out motivated, man. You actually want to go there.
You have your little moment, you have your little I'm a sad sack or whatever, and then you come out and you go, you know what, and you've done this too, Mark. I've seen you, it's the way you do all the all-nighters.
You're doing it now. This week has been that, right?
Yeah.
In a
I've seen you do it
yeah.
as well, Max. We share the office, and it's just like you can almost use it to fuel your own motivation.
Yep.
But read Peaks and Valleys.
So just to recap on that one. So if for those listening,
recap.
We'll just recap on the offer. So we're going to give out 5 books. I hope this is right. Hey guys, Matt here. So sorry, I'm about to deliver you the wrong email address. So here's the right one. It's hello@simplemindspodcast.com. Forget what you heard in the episode, although with a bit of luck it's been cut out. But anyway, the real one, get in touch with us, hello@simplemindspodcast.com. And if you put peaks and valleys in the subject and you have nothing to do with any of the fine gentlemen involved in this podcast, because I could just see someone trying to get 5
I'd
copies.
say no direct relation.
Five copies to get on the flip challenge.
Yeah.
To
Somebody
try.
comes in called Santiago.
Santiago, I'll be checking the mailing address, but we're going to give 5 copies away, so email hello@simplemindspodcast.com. Peaks and valleys in the subject title, and Marco, you want to wrap this one up?
Yeah, I do, and I want to wrap it up with, and let's not dive into this, okay?
You can't put it out
But I'm
there.
going to put it out there it's another quote from the book, which basically it says, to change a valley into a peak, you need to change one of 2 things: what is happening or how you feel about what is happening. So thanks for listening to episode 10. We really recommend you reading Peaks and Valleys. Hit us up on the email for that giveaway, and we will see you or hang out with you next time. Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Catch ya.
Bye.
I missed that.